Oh, hello. Welcome to the workshop. Today, we're going to begin starting to work on a mantle that my family friend has commissioned. It is going to be a floating mantle, and it will have mitered corners, and it is going to be out of reclaimed clear vertical grain Doug fir that I found in a dumpster in the alley a few months ago. What a treat and a prize. So let's get after it. Having a general blade for cutting lumber, making things like a shed, is totally fine for things like cutting lumber. But for really fine woodworking, you want to switch out your blade and put on a fine finish blade. This mantle has 3 main pieces and 2 little side pieces. Because the 2 little side pieces will be cut from the front piece, I'm working with a total of 3 boards, and beginning by marking the orientation of the boards to keep things clear when bevels enter the picture. The first step of every project begins with milling everything down. After sending all 3 of the boards through the table saw to get a nice straight edge on them, I set the table saw at a 45 degrees. I would have preferred 45.5, but 42.25 is the furthest my saw goes, and it ended up working just fine. For the front piece, I set my fence and sent it through to get the first bevel, then flipped it around and sent it through on the other side so my front is done, with a bevel on each long edge. I now reset my fence for the top and bottom piece of the mantle, which will be mirror images of each other. So with the fence set, but both top and bottom of the mantle go through once. So there's a bevel on one side and a straight edge on the other. And this is me learning that a camera on my outfeed table is a no-go. We now move on to the ends of the boards, which will get bevels as well. Setting the chop saw to 45 degrees, I cut the front piece a little long, but saving the extra 15 to 18 inches to act as the end caps. Setting up my super fancy shop stop, which is a piece of wood and a clamp, that now acts as the stop for all 3 of the long boards. With the stop in place, make your bevel cuts on both ends of all 3 boards, but this is where the marking you did earlier comes into play. Make sure you visualize it so your bevels are in the right direction. So I watched a video by Spencer Lewis with Insider Carpentry entitled Master Perfect Miters, and it was very informative, and I used a lot of his tips and tricks for my mantle, and it worked out great. I want 3 little blocks on the inside for bracing. So measure from inside bevel to inside bevel of the front piece of the mantle, and then measure from inside bevel to edge of the upper or lower piece. Take this number and subtract the depth of the ledger you'll be using, and those are the dimensions for the interior bracing. Throw in some pocket holes on the end that will be in contact with the front piece, and you're ready to go. And finally, it's time to assemble. I used reinforced strength strapping tape as recommended, and it worked like a charm. It didn't take out any wood on removal, but if I was using pre-finished or painted wood, I might try a less aggressive tape. With all the boards taped, let them fall over the side and into place. The blocking gets screwed down evenly and glued if you like, and then to get the exact dimensions for the end caps, throw some clamps on and measure. Life isn't problem-free, and neither is woodworking. So take your measurements, and if the end caps are slightly different lengths, congratulations ahead of time on problem solving and making it look great. The end caps are made from the cutoff of the front piece of the mantle. 2 out of the 3 bevels are already completed. You just have to add 1 bevel to the short side and you're good to go. I like doing my angle cuts first and then leave the 90-degree edge long. So to trim it down, I'm using the chop saw set at 0 degrees and there's less room for error. Basically, it's easier to trim with your chop saw at 0 degrees than on a bevel, so just trim on a 0 degree. Glue up time. I want enough glue so every surface is totally covered, and I get a little squeeze out on the inside, but not a lot into the tape. I'm in the beginning stages of my glue journey, but I nailed this one. I have not yet started my humility journey. That will be later in the year. End caps also fit like a dream. They got a heavy glue up, and then I used 23 gauge nails in an 18 gauge nail gun. Which one should not do? Because they ended up shooting doubles, and I'm lucky I didn't lose an eye. But out of all of it, I learned something. I learned that I need a 23 gauge nail gun. With the glue still workable, I burnished the edges lightly using a round edge from a screwdriver. However, because I was working with fir, which is a soft wood, it didn't make any difference wet or dry, and I ended up doing it when the tape was off and totally dry, and again, it just worked fine. If I were using clamps that were all the same, would this step have been easier? Yes, but because I didn't have that option, I had a creative time instead. The moment of truth revealed a beautifully lined up miter edge. And then to sanding, which feels like a millennium, but really is just a few hours. I started with 80, then raised the grain, waited for it to dry, then advanced to 120 and finished with 180. At the end, I hand sand with a block and ensure there are no swirl marks from the orbital sander. For the ledger board, just measure the inside length of the mantle and take away a couple of inches so you have some wiggle room on install. Then cut down width on the table saw, ensure you have a smooth and snug fit, and you're done with the ledger board. Now might be a good time to advocate for using the planer for this project. I was using reclaimed wood and didn't completely trust that it had no metal hidden within it. The boards I used were all 3/4 of an inch, but after getting them all beveled, there were very slight thickness variations that would have been taken care of if I had planed them down first. Moral of the story, if you have a planer, use it. For this finished, I used Odie's oil. It's rubbed on with a non-woven pad and worked into the wood. Dry time is like 3 to 12 hours or so, and then you buff off the remaining oil with a clean rag. This oil finish soaks into the wood. It does not sit on top or harden, so any splinters or sharp areas are not going to be fixed with an oil finish as they would with a polyurethane finish. This mantle was going into a house built in the 40s with clear vertical grain fir floors that had been walked on and seen some life. So it was decided to leave the little nail holes and imperfections where they were, choosing to highlight instead of hide. For install, the ledger board needs to be screwed into studs. So I find studs using a fancy schmancy stud finder, also known as my pointer finger. Mark center on tape on the wall. Find your studs and mark them, then transfer those marks to your ledger board. I drill each spot to ensure I hit a stud, and lo and behold, I did. Pre-drill on your ledger board, put the ledger board up, get it level, and screw that puppy in. I was able to get 3 studs, and I used 3.5-inch star head screws. The mantle goes onto the ledger board like a well-fitting Vermont glove, and then a few 2 to 2.5-inch trim head screws go through the top and bottom to secure the mantle to the ledger board. Always pre-drill, especially when you're using older wood. And with 3 screws on top and 2 on bottom, I felt confident this mantle could support an African violet, textbook on ornithology, and at least 4 volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica 1966 edition. And with that, a gorgeous mantle sourced from a dumpster in the alley gets a second life entirely, and the circle of life continues on. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe and check out more videos on canning jar shelves, dado jigs, box joints, and more. Happy mantle making, my woodworking friends!